other things. Even the kashrus laws, some of them are difficult to understand. This is chukim. Then there's eidos. Eidos are such mitzvahs that are closer to our ability to understand. But were it not that the Torah gave them to us, we would not invent them on our own, such as, for instance, Shabbos. Eidos, things which are testimonials to various occurrences. Pesach, Shavuos, Sukkot, Purim. And then there is Mishpatim. Mishpatim are such laws in the Torah that are essentially in the category of civil laws, bein odom lachaveirei, interhuman relations. And the principle of Mishpatim is such, not only are we capable of understanding them, but if they had not been given, that's the category. If they had not been given, we would invent them on our own. Because as a matter of fact, every civilized society has to have rules by which it operates. You can't drive a car down the road if you don't obey the traffic signals. It just is an imperative thing. So the Torah is telling us, as we discussed, actually pointed out briefly last week, that although Mishpatim are in that category, that life itself compels us to develop Mishpatim. But you have to understand that the Mishpatim which Hashem is telling us are not of that category. These are Mishpatim that come from Hashem to us. These are not Mishpatim that are developed by human experience. And Mishpatim, in effect, even though we can relate to them and understand, we have to recognize that inherent and contained in these Mishpatim are godly principles and godly secrets, on par, equal to Chukim and Neidos. And this is one obvious message in the fact that right after Matan Torah, Gilui Har Sinai, what is the first set of laws, the first set of mitzvahs that Torah gives? Mishpatim. Because Mishpatim are also dependent completely on Har Sinai. As a matter of fact, if we examine the Mishpatim, the laws of the Torah on the civil principles, on civil questions, so even though the general rule and general approach seems to be something that we can rationalize, we can understand, but when we go in to some detail, it loses it. And it becomes almost a chukkah, beyond understanding. I'll give you an example that you may have come across, may have learned. In this week, you for sure learn it. I know to what extent you become familiar with the details. There are shomerim. In the Parsha it says there are laws of shomerim. Shomerim means if someone commits himself to watch an article for someone else. So there are 4 different categories of shomerim. Shomer chinam, one who commits himself to watch it gratis without pay. One who borrows it, he's also obligated to watch it, but he is borrowing it for his own use, which is totally his own benefit. Then there's a soicher and a socher, a soicher, one who rents an article or hires an article, one who watches it for pay. And each one of these has different levels of obligation, of liability if something happens to the article. And then the Torah says, it seems as we're learning, it says, oh, I fully understand what it says. It makes perfect good sense. I don't know if I would be able to divide it along these lines, but once it's divided, it makes perfect good sense. But then the Torah puts in a monkey wrench and says that if the owner of the article, the owner of the cow, or the owner of the car from whom you're borrowing it, was doing some service to you at the time when you lent it to you, the Olav Imoy it's called in the Torah, then you're not liable for anything that happens. And this extends itself all the way down to the Shemer Chinam, to the free watchman, in other words, who unpaid watchman, who has got the least amount of liability. He is obligated only if he was neglectful, negligent in watching. So that should be logical that he obligated himself to watch. He should be liable if he was negligent. But if the owner of the article was doing him a service at the time, he's not liable. I challenge anyone here to try to make sense of this in our context.
At the time of his negligence,
It means this. No, not time of negligence. It means the following, okay? Please lend me your pen. Okay? You lend me the pen. Oh, could you pass me the glass of water?
My pleasure.
Okay. And as you pass in the glass of water, you'll lend me the pen.
Right.
I'm not liable for whatever happens to it.
You're not liable for whatever
happens to the pen. The pen falls down and breaks. Too bad.
Because I was handing you a glass of water.
That's right.
Serves me right. So I'm giving him the water.
Because he was making a favor, so that's why?
No, I'm not. I'm explaining to you. I'm just giving you the bare surface. You'll come to the posik in the Torah. You'll debate it amongst yourself what that means. The point is that the Gemara tells a story where the Rosh Yeshiva, the Amira, was sitting with his Talmidim, Amiroim, but were learning, and as they were learning these halachas, so one of the Talmidim said, "Hey, come to think of it, you are working for us. You're teaching us. So therefore, if we borrow something from you, we won't be liable." So he was taken aback. How? That's not nice to say. Then he turns around and he says, "No, you are obligated to. You, on the contrary, you are serving me because you are obligated to come to the class. And the Talmud is supposed to come to the class. We're not talking about payment. We're talking about the duty, the obligation." So there's a whole debate. Who is in service of whom? The Talmidim are in service of the Rav, or the Rav is in service of the Talmidim. And the Gemara concludes there's different aspects of it, whether who chooses the topic and so forth. But one of the conclusion is that during certain times of the year, like before Pesach, when you're supposed to teach certain halachas of Pesach, where there is a specific obligation to teach certain things, there the teacher is working for the students because he's got an obligation to teach this. Other times of the year, the students are working for the teacher because they have to come to his class and he chooses the topic. Okay, so that's an interesting episode in the Gemara. But this is just to show you how we're learning Torah's Hashem. And even though some of it fits into the world perspective, and we can kind of view it from a worldly perspective, by no means does it fit into the world. And even if it does, it's not designed this way in order to fit into the world. It's designed this way because that's Hashem's will. If it happens to fit, so it fits. But essentially what the mitzvah is, that's Hashem's will. This is what happened at Matan Torah. Eden have been removed from being world-based, to being godly-based. Like I told you, I think, in the past, the story of Rabbi Melech, of Meir Mishlian. It was one of the Meir, I think it was in the Magistan meeting, or something like that. So he was one of the Rabbeim, was a great tzaddik. In his town, there was a very steep hill. On the bottom of the hill was the mikveh. So normally you went down the hill. That was the shortest way. Go down the hill to the mikveh. In wintertime, when the hill was covered with snow and ice, so everybody went around the hill, a much longer path. But because the hill was not possible to walk down, everybody did that except for the mayor. He went straight down the hill without paying attention to the snow and ice, exactly the way he would do in the middle of the summer. And in this town, everybody knew who the mayor was, and nobody questioned him, how he does it, how come finished. That's what the mayor is able to do, nobody else is able to do. So one time some merchants came into town, and they're, know-it-alls, and they're a little chauvinistic, and they say, what kind of thing is this? If he can do it, we can do it. So they started walking down the hill. They made a couple of steps, and whoop, they went sliding down, and they hurt themselves, whatever the story is. It was not a beautiful scene. And they were convinced that it's impossible. It's impossible. We watched them do it, but it's impossible. After they recuperated from their wounds, they came back to the mayor and said, we apologize for being so disrespectful. And so on. Tell me, how do you do it? It's impossible to do this. So he says to them, if you're tied up, if you're holding up upwards, you don't fall down. He says, Meryl is tied up upwards, so you don't fall down. So this is a story with Reb Meir. But in fact, each one of us, every Yid, is tied up upwards. This is the concept of Kabbalah soil. What's Kabbalah soil mean? Kabbalah soil does not mean just do it because you're going to be hit if you don't do it. Kabbalah soil means because I'm tied up to Hashem. And I can do that which is not doable by someone else. Surely we stand on the ground and we cannot walk down a slippery hill. But nevertheless, we too, every one of us, is tied up upwards. And we don't fall down because something happens in our physical world. We stay up aloof. We have something to hold us up. As a matter of fact, I once explained to you, I believe, that the human being, the structure of the human being approximates his neshama, like we spoke yesterday. Like the neshama is, the seichel is above, and then there is midas, and that's how the human body is structured. But then when we observe the human being, we see a very stunning phenomenon. Every animal in the world, the way it's structured physically, you can physically, by laws of physics, explain how it supports itself on the ground. Right? A cow, an animal stands on fours. A table also stands. If you put 4 legs under a table, doesn't have to be, it's not a miracle. You put 4 legs on a table and it stands. It has there's a physical explanation how it stands. It fits perfectly in the rules of nature and the worldly rules. Even a bird that stands on 2, but it stands on 2 and the 2 legs come out from the middle of its body and the body balances it out. So it has a balance, but it's a balance. Like a scale. All creatures are like that except for the human being. The human being, the way he stands, there is no physiological explanation how he stands. It's totally out of balance. A tall entity standing on 2 small legs, and he's standing, and he's solid. The only reason he stands is that he has a neshama, and he has a kind of a neshama that raises him upwards, and is keeping him up. It's the brain that's holding us up, not our feet. Because we have no balance at all on that. The feet are keeping us to the ground, but not keeping us standing up straight. So we have to understand that a human being, a yid, I'll explain to you this whole thing, it's a human being, even though others, non-Yidden, also have the same phenomenon, but it's essentially for a challenge for the purpose of Bechira and so forth, but certainly Bechira, that there should be obvious choice. In other words, if it would be obvious that a Yid is different than a Goy, then it would be no challenge. Okay, but the principle is still obvious, right? A human being is supported by his spirit, not by his physical body. And physically speaking, if a person is in good spirits, he becomes physically strong. And if he fails, if he lets himself down, then he loses physical strength as well. The Gemara, there's a halacha. Do you know what halacha I'm referring to? No. There's a halacha in the Gemara. This is a halacha that we don't necessarily practice because it would open up all kinds of loopholes. But the halacha in the Gemara says that if you carry on Shabbos a child who is able to walk, it's not called carrying. Yeah. Why? Because hachai noisei atzatzmai. Because a living person carries himself. In other words, carrying a living person is not carrying, because just like as he's carrying himself when he walks, it's his spirit that carries him. It's not his feet. The same thing when he's carried, it's his spirit that carries him. Okay, that's an interesting Gemara. So everything after Matan Torah changed for us. Even our civil laws, our whole way of viewing the world has changed for us. And it could be said, it's interesting that when the first mishpat, the first halacha, the first din that the Torah tells us, Mishpatim is about an Eved Ivri. This you all learned already, right? The first thing is Eved Ivri. Kisikna Eved Ivri, that when you buy an Eved Ivri, the whole union of Avodim is not applicable today. It doesn't have validity in today's circumstance, only when there is a yovel and all that. But halachic Rabbi Torah, there is such a thing as an Eved Ivri. And the first thing the Torah says right away, that an Eved Ivri, even though this is a person who had now fallen down to such a low level where he lost completely his self-respect, he goes and sells himself to another person. The Torah says that's his worldly circumstance. It doesn't change who he is. And he cannot become an Eved. He has certain obligations towards you, but you have obligations towards him as well. And you can only hold him for 6 years, and cannot be beyond that. And there's certain dinim of how you're supposed to treat him during these 6 years. Because this is not what it appears to be. Coming back to the general union of the Pasha, there's a Sikha from Rebbe. The Rebbe explains really a very perplexing aspect in these couple of Pashas. And the Rebbe really clarifies it very brightly. I want to speak about this Sikha, not in detail the Sikha, but I want to bring it out to ourselves. The question that the Rebbe asks, and this is a broadly discussed question, is the order of things in these couple of Pashas. There is Yisroi, ends with Matan Torah, right? The whole thing of Matan Torah took place in Yisroi. Then Mishpatim starts with Dinim, which seems to be something that doesn't do with Maimed Har Sin, doesn't do with the revelation in Sinai. It has to do with Dinim that the Rebbe gave to Moshe. And then, at the end of the Seder, as you will see, starts all over again, the Dinim of Matan Torah. When it starts saying, Moshe was told to come up in the mountain.
At the end of Mishpatim.
At the end of Mishpatim. The famous saying, the famous quote that we say that Eden said at Matan Torah, Naaseh v'nishma, is not in Pashas Yisroi, where you would think it would be. It is in Pashas Mishpatim. Then the Torah goes back to talking about Naaseh v'nishma, about the whole preparation to Matan Torah, what Moshe did with the Yidden and so forth. How he prepared them to Matan Torah. And now Moshe and Eden said Naaseh v'nishma, and then Moshe went up on the mountain, and the whole thing of all the details of what took place at Matan Torah actually is related in Pashas Mishpatim, completely out of sequence, out of context. And after that is Pashas Truma, which is the next week already, and Pashas Truma talks about the building of the Mishkan. So, as I said, this is a broad question which is discussed in many places. But the Rebbe gives us the following overview. He says that Matan Torah changed the whole structure of the world. Before Matan Torah, godliness and world didn't mix. It's called Elyonim, that which is above didn't come down, and which is below didn't go up above. Even the big tzaddikim like Avram, Yitzchak, and Yankiv, who did Torah mitzvahs, they couldn't affect the physical world. They did mitzvahs, and they served Hashem, but they couldn't affect the physical world. Like it says by Yankiv Avinu, you may have learned, I'm sure, that Yankiv Avinu put the sticks in the water, in the shoket, and the ship came to drink, and they saw the sticks that were peeled off, partially peeled off. Yeah, I'm not familiar with. Okay. Akudim, right? In Pashas Vayetze, if you go back to Pashas Vayetze, you take a look. So the Zohar says on this that this was actually a virus from Tefillin, because these sticks looked like the Ritzuos of Tefillah on our arm. And yet, even though Yankee was doing Avodah of Tefillah, whatever his kavanas were, so during the time when he did it, his kavanah, this was Avodah of Tefillah. Afterwards, his sticks remained plain sticks. They didn't become holy, like our Tefillah are holy. They remained plain sticks because they didn't have the ability to affect and permeate the physical world. Matan Torah broke through these barriers. Hashem had nullified these demarcation lines and says, no, El Yenim, the touch which is above can come down below. That is below can rise above. Essentially, this means to us that there's no limit how high we can rise. Like I said before, Meir and Prince he was here in this physical world, actually he was held up by higher force. We're not bounded by the physical world. So, there were two things, the Rebbe says, that needed to be accomplished during Matan Torah. But that which is above should come down below, and that which is below should rise up. So the Rebbe says that in Pashas Yisroi, the Torah speaks about the first aspect of Matan Torah. When Hashem came down on Har Sinai and revealed himself and he spoke to us. Pashas Mishpatim speaks about the second aspect of Matan Torah, where Eden, Moshe Rabbeinu brought Eden, prepared them to rise up and to receive that revelation and to receive the Torah. Now, when Hashem comes down, that's something which happens very quickly. But that which Eden have to do themselves, for that there is need of a lot of preparation and a lot of effort on the part of the Eden. And as you will learn at the end of Pashas Mishpatim, there was a Mizbeach and a Korbanos and the whole thing that Moshe Rabbeinu did with the Eden. And only after that the Eden said, Nasa v'nishma, when they were really prepared for this. This is essentially referring to what we always speak about, what the Chassidus speaks about, avodah that we do by ourselves. That which we work through from bottom up. I'll just conclude the point in the Sikh and then come back to discuss it, how it pertains to us, because that's the crux of the union. The Rebbe points out an interesting thing, that which happens at Har Sinai happened for the moment. Once, like it says, Bimshoich HaYevel, when the big horn sounded its last sound, then you're allowed to go back on the mountain. The mountain didn't, you have to demarcate the mountain only for a limited period of time. Afterwards you can open it, reopen it. Right? And it happened for that moment. But that which was accomplished at the end of Pashas Mishpatim, that Eden themselves were working with their own koiches, and they actually worked through and prepared themselves for Matan Torah, that accomplishes it on a permanent basis. It's not for a moment. This is why immediately after Pashas Mishpatim came the command to build a Mishkan. And what is the Mishkan? And then afterwards it was replaced by the Mikdash. This represents the Gilui that took place at Har Sinai on a permanent basis. And who affects it? Who can accomplish it? The Eden themselves. Each one does it. We do it ourselves. This is not something that comes from mind. This is something which we have to do ourselves. And this brings us to the crux, so to speak, of the union of Mishpatim that we started talking about. This is Pashas Mishpatim. Pashas Mishpatim means that there are Torah laws, they're godly wisdom, Torah laws, and yet this is something which we are supposed to be able to really relate to and understand. And establish in our own mind that we can relate to them. Das mit Mishpat. It's not enough to know what it says in the Torah. We have to then dig and dig until our minds can relate to it and it becomes, so to speak, our own thinking. This avodah that we do, this is what the yeshiva is about, because to learn halacha, open up a Shulchan Aruch and to know what to do, is you open up a Shulchan Aruch and know what to do. Being in a yeshiva and 24 hours a day, being involved in delving into Torah, the purpose of that is that we should change completely our worldview. That's what takes place. Whereas the worldview is that everything starts from the physical, and everything is depending on the physical. And there's a physical, a logical, physical structure, physical explanation how everything happens. And the Torah view is not so at all. The physical is only the external. But really what maintains it, like we said before, what keeps a human being standing up is not his physical body at all, not his physical structure at all. It's his spirit. This avodah. Previously, now at this point it's already quite some time, a couple of years ago, we spoke about the various qualities that the human being has, such as seichel and midas, intellect. And in the world, we discussed this, and I invite you again, if you can get onto the archives, this is discussed in great length. In the world, intellect means that I'm able to figure out a complex mathematical problem. That's what's called intellect. Or such other physically world-based questions. And what we are taught, what we are given through the Torah, is a completely different perception of the intellect. In today's Hayom Yom, you read Hayom Yom, you read Hayom Yom every day, right?
It's in Yiddish today.
I'm sorry?
It's in Yiddish today.
It's in English.
Yiddish.
It's in Yiddish, but you read it in English too, right?
No, I read it in English.
You read it in English?
Yeah, I read it for everybody.
You read it for everybody, and if you read it, I'm sure everybody heard it. So what does it ever say? That there are laws. As a matter of fact, this is put into this pasha because it's Mishpatim. There are laws that are made from life, from human experience.
Yesterday.
Yeah, it was 10 of them.
Oh, Tzanorema, okay, yesterday. Sorry. Right, it was Tzanorema. There are laws that are made by life, and there are laws that make life. We have to understand what that means. The intellect, when we talk about Chassidus, we talk about seichel. We're not talking about the seichel that can figure out how to get from here to Crown Heights. That's not seichel at all. Because lahavdil, a cat can also find its way from here to Crown Heights. And anything that a cat can do is not in the category of seichel. Seichel is not that which can figure out things and figure out a puzzle, put things in place in the physical world. Seichel provides a different perspective, different view of what I see. Like we always illustrated this in a simple sense when we discussed this, that an animal with an animal's seichel, a nefesh abahamis, comes into this room and sees tables and people sitting around and sees, oh, you're in my way. You're just an obstacle. It's just a physical obstacle for me to go to where I want to go. Doesn't see what's happening over here. And only a human being coming in says, oh, something is being discussed. Same thing, you come into a chasana, so only a human being recognizes that something is happening over here other than food being eaten. An animal sees that food is being eaten, that's all it sees. But a human being immediately says, no, something else is happening, something which is much greater than eating food. That's the beginning of seichel, which is what gives that elevates a person from the physical world and gives him a different perspective. A human being interprets, sees in the world that which an animal doesn't see at all. And that's what the animal does see, a human being doesn't care for, doesn't relate. So these are the faculties, the special gifts that Hashem gave us. And He gave us a Torah that allows us to develop and to reveal these faculties. There is no way that we can understand the Torah without employing seichel. And I'm talking about a real seichel. Seichel that defines the world, that explains the world, not the seichel that understands the world from a world perspective, or the one that sheds light onto the darkness of the world. We can think of it, it's important that we understand this. We can think of it in the following way. Let's say if this were a perfectly dark room, no lights, no windows, it's completely dark. And you went into this room, and you want to find out what's going on in this room. So you would walk around the walls, and you would crisscross the room, and feel your way around. And eventually, in the darkness, you'll be able to identify every last piece of furniture in the room. And you know exactly its size, where it stands, and everything. There's no question about it. That's figuring out in the dark. This is essentially the type of seichel. It's called nefesh, the seichel bahami. This is what Rabbi Abba understands. I understand, I know where everything stands. Seichel that we're talking about is the oir ha-seichel, the light of seichel, which means that seichel gives us a different perspective. Not just I'm figuring out what's going on in this room. I'm figuring out what there is, what furniture there is. I see it from a different perspective. I say, what is really going on? Why is the furniture there? Not what's there. Why is it there? That's a different thing. That we can only see in light. In light we see the whole room instantaneously, and we see that it is what type of room, what it stands for, why it's made like the way it is. The same thing in our view of the world. There is nothing in the physical world that tells us, that compels us to say, oh, God created, this is a godly world, God created the world. It's all physical. And therefore, like the animal doesn't scream God. It doesn't know what it is. It knows a tree, and it knows a hole in the ground. A human being, when we say in davening, we talk in davening, in the first part of davening, in the Psukim de Zimra, in the Hallelujahs, we say Ashrei, and then the Hallelujahs. What do we say? We talk about the creation, talk about the world. When we talk about the world in davening, even though we're talking about the world, but we immediately recognize that we're talking about the godly presence in the world, not about the world per se. We say that there are big creatures. Tanini v'choldheimes, there is the deep, and there is the seas, and there is the sky, and all that. We're not talking about the sky, because we recognize the godly presence that the sky attests to, shows us. Like we say in Shabbos, Hashomayim, Misaprim Kodkel, the Shomayim are telling us about Hashem's kavod, Hashem's greatness. Because a human being sees things differently. Doesn't see it as a physical entity. He sees it the way his seichel perceives it. And seichel perceives things from a perspective of what does it stand for? What is its value? Why is it there? In other words, the Torah has elevated us from being subjected to being, so to speak, under the magnet of the earth and limited to what the physical world allows us to understand, to viewing and to seeing the world from a completely and totally different perspective. We are, in fact, in real sense, we are hovering. We're just touching the ground. We're not standing depending on the ground. We're not dependent on the ground. We are dependent on our faith. We're dependent on our spirit. This is what carries us through. Not on the ground. And not in the circumstance on the ground. You know the story of the Frierdiker Rebbe. The Frierdiker Rebbe, when he was being imprisoned in Russia and being interrogated, and the Frierdiker Rebbe writes in his memoirs, in his notes, that he had resolved that he is not going to cooperate. This was a resolution he made. He's not going to cooperate with them at all. That's to explain to us, explain to you a little bit what's behind that resolution. An illegitimate government, a government that is based on brutality, not based on legitimate purpose of what the government is. Any cooperation you give it, you're actually strengthening Klippa. And therefore the Rebbe was completely oblivious to his own welfare. He says, he resolved not to cooperate with them at all. And as a result of that, the Rebbe suffered immensely because he was beaten. The Rebbe was actually physically beaten in prison. One time he was thrown down a staircase. So one time during this interrogation, He refused to answer. So his interrogator took out a revolver, a gun, and he pointed to him. And he says, this little toy, he says, has made many people open their mouths. And the Rebbe looked him straight in the eye. He says, this little toy doesn't faze me. This little toy will scare only one who has many gods and one world. I have many worlds and one God. And this toy does not faze me. Now, this is a tremendous character strength. Tremendous strength. There's no question that everybody can speak like this. But I want to understand that we should understand that this is real to us as well. But practically speaking, you need a man like the Rebbe to be able to. But we should be able to relate to this. You have to understand. We also we don't face the Russian guns, and we don't face brutal imprisonment. But we face our own Shabbamis. We face our own challenges. We also kind of get stumped by the world and say, oh, how am I going to go through this world? We have to understand that Hashem, by giving us the Torah, has actually freed us from Mitzrayim. Freeding us from Mitzrayim means that we are not bounded, we're not limited to follow on a path that is cut out and paved by worldly logic. We have an ability to reveal faculties that are completely hidden from someone who has never learned Torah. To reveal faculties and strengths and spirit that is completely oblivious. Just to give you an illustration, you know that our children in all the Torah do not have any secular instruction, right? They don't study English. They learn from kindergarten all through the end of the yeshiva period. They learn exclusively in Limud HaKodesh. And then these illiterates have to go out and become shluchim. And where are they shluchim? They're shluchim amongst professors, lawyers, doctors, right? And they can't tell them, listen, I don't know how to read. I mean, that's ridiculous. They're not going to listen to them. So, when our boys need to do something like this, what do? They pick up a book and they learn a little bit English, and then they go out in any place, wherever they go out, and within a relatively short time they become polished speakers. And they write freely, they write beautiful articles. I'll tell you, I have a son in Long Island. He's a shliach in Long Island, in Port Washington. This is mamash. It's like an elite society. There was nothing there. It was a total wasteland as far as Yiddishkeit was concerned. Huge reform temples, and there's polished rabbis and all that. The reform congregants come to him because he's a good speaker. And this reform rabbi, he's polished. And they come to him as a dynamic speaker. Where did he get it? He's got the spirit. That's what we're here for. And it's not just the spirit for our own lives. To face our own lives, to face our own little world. we have to understand what this is all about. We have to rise from being imprisoned in Mitzrayim and being dependent on the worldly rules of facing the world of combat, and do what we need with a completely different spirit. This is what happens to our children, and it's going to happen to you in Mr. Shem. We sit and learn, and when the bell rings, it's time to go out. You go out and you face the world, and you figure out what to do, because you have the spirit, you have the neshama, and you can face whatever comes your way. So these couple of years, or whatever months, whatever time we have in yeshiva, this brings out the koyach hanefesh, the learning Torah brings out the koyach by us, that we should be able to carry through in real life whatever we need to carry through. Whatever challenges come to us. Mitzvah Hashem. Nothing in the world can face us. We always find a way to do it. If you read the stories of our shluchim, the difficulties that they had overcome and how they did it, you'll see that that's exactly what happens. Exactly what happens. They do what they need to do, and their spirit just carries them right above the obstacles. And this is what the Torah is, and this is what, especially the second part in Parshas Mishpatim, where you have to work through your own intellect. And you have to, so to speak, elevate our own understanding of the world, elevate our own intellect, so that we see the world from a different perspective. We're not faced by the world and say, oh, it's a big world. No, it's not a big world. It's God's world. Nothing happens in the world except but by God's will. That's how we face it. And Hashem will be matzliach to each one of you with this short preparation that you have here to face your lives and to build very, very successful and happy and glorious lives.
Amen.